Hello student friends, this is Professor R.M. Mahendrakar from JSS Arts, Science and Commerce College, Gokak. Now in this unit 2, we'll be studying about the population ecology, the interactions among the populations, then we'll be studying gene ecology, where we'll be studying about ecotypes and ecads, then ecological succession, structure of ecosystem, food chain, food web, and the ecological pyramids. So first let us begin with the population ecology. A group of individuals of a particular species occupying a definite space in which the individuals interact, interbreed, and exchange genetic information is referred to as population. Population is a unit of community. It is a self-regulatory system that helps in maintaining the stability of the ecosystem. Population can be divided into many small subgroups called demes or local populations. The branch of biology that deals with the characteristics, structure, and regulation of population is called population ecology. In other words, population ecology is the study of populations, especially population abundance, and how they change over time. If the population grows unchecked, the resources start to become limited. Hence, a habitat can sustain a certain population abundance. Thus, the maximum population abundance for a given species an environment can sustain is called the carrying capacity. The subject of population ecology is very wide. In this presentation, we'll be discussing about the characteristics of population and population structure. Now first let us see the characteristics of population. A population has a group characteristics such as the density, natality, that is the birth rate, mortality, that is the death rate, dispersal means how they are spread in the ecosystem, then age distribution, biotic potential, and growth forms. Now let us see about the Malthusian theory of population. The Malthusian theory of population is a theory of exponential population growth and arithmetic food supply growth. Thomas Robert Malthus, an English cleric and scholar, published this theory in his 1798 writings. He wrote an essay on the principles of population. Malthus examined that the relationship between the population growth and the resources are interconnected. From this, he developed the Malthusian theory of population growth, in which he wrote that population growth occurs exponentially, so it increases according to birth rate. For example, if every member of a family tree reproduces, the tree will continue to grow with each generation. On the other hand, the food production increases arithmetically. So it only increases at the given point in given time. Malthus wrote that if the population growth is left unchecked, it can outgrow their resources and result in drastic decrease in population. There is a very natural way to think of a highly simplistic and idealistic equation like Malthus's equation, which is denoted here, that is Nt is equals to No to the power Rt, where N is the population abundance at the time, T is the time, No is the initial abundance, and R is the population growth rate. Now this equation can be taken as the fundamental law of ecology. So now first let us study the first characteristic feature of a population, that is density. Population density is the number of organisms belonging to a species per unit area, usually quoted per square meter or per square mile, and cubic meters in case of aquatic medium. If n is the total number of individuals and s is the unit of space, then the population density D can be calculated by the formula D is equal to n divided by S. The density of a population is dependent on many factors. Some are danger of predators. If the predators number is more, then the herbivores and the prey become less in number. The second is the availability of food. So if there is sufficient food, water, light, heat and shelter available, automatically the density of the population also increases. And so also the nesting places. That if there is sufficient space for nesting, then the population density increases. Now to count the number of individuals, it is very easy to determine the counting of the individuals in large animal population. For example, the large animals which live in herds, or starfishes in tidal pools, and sheep in this island, etc. But in most of the cases, it is impractical to count all the individuals in a population. In such cases, ecologists use a variety of sampling to estimate the density of the population. Few examples are the quadrant method, by determining the number of nest, burrows and tracks, fecal droppings, etc. And third is mark recapture method. Now in this presentation, I'll be explaining you only the quadrant method. A quadrant is a square made of 1 meter by 1 meter. It is again divided into 10 rows and 10 columns. So to estimate a density of a population, we first select an area. So here you can see in the image, an area is selected whose width is 20 meters and length is 31 meters. So it comes to around 620 square meters. Then this whole area we divided into 1 meter squares. Then we randomly select the square, and in this randomly selected squares we estimate the species density. That is, we count the number of species by placing the quadrant on that particular area. So here you can see we have selected these squares, and in these squares we place this quadrant and we try to count the number of species under study. Now for example, here you can see it is a daisy flower whose species density is what we are going to determine in that area. Now when you are counting the number of species, when you place a quadrant on that, whatever the species are in the square, we first count them. Now for example, here in the square you can see there are around 5 daisy species. Now here you can see there are 2 daisy species which are on the boundary of the quadrant. Now if the species is more than half inside the square, then we take it into consideration. But if only a part of the species is inside the square and the remaining 3/4 is outside, then we don't take it into consideration. So likewise, here you can see the total number of daisy species will come to around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which are in the square, and this is the one which is almost half inside the square, and this one only a part of it is inside the square. So this we are not going to take into counting. So like this, the squares are randomly placed and the population of the daisy species is calculated, and then we make a tally of it. Now that is in the fifth row and 15th column there were 6. So like this, we'll first find the number of daisy species, then we find a mean of all this total population. So that mean comes to around 7. So like this, the density of a particular species can be estimated. But if you are going to calculate more than one species, that also can be done. And method is same, but only thing in that square, whichever the plant species are there, all those plant species are the individuals of all the different species are counted, and to which species it belongs to we are confirmed by referring the Cook's flora, and then its abundance, its density, the relative abundance, relative density, and percentage frequency is calculated by this formulas. Distribution. The arrangement of individuals of a population within a particular space is called distribution. There are 3 patterns of distribution: uniform, random, and clumped. Now in uniform distribution, as you can see here, the plant species are uniformly distributed in that particular area. So if all the plant species are distributed uniformly in a given area, then such type of plant distribution, we call it as uniform dispersion. Even the penguins laying these eggs, that is the nesting of the penguins, also is one of the best example for uniform dispersion. The second is the random dispersion or random distribution. Now in this case, the plant species or animal species are randomly distributed in the given area. That is, in some areas it will be more, in some areas it will be less, means it is not uniform, it is at random. So such type of distribution we call it as random distribution or random dispersion. Now here also you can see, now this species of plant, they are distributed here, here and here. Now these varieties are distributed here. So you don't see any proper pattern or regular pattern in distribution. They are just distributed randomly in the given area. Now the third is the clumped dispersion or clumped distribution. Now here in the given area, the species or the plant species or the animal species, they remain clumped together. That is, they remain in a group in a particular area. Now here you can see in this image, now the plant in this whole area, the plants are grouped here. You can see this is a group of these palms here. Here you can see another group of palms here. You can see another group of palms here. You can see, so such a type of distribution where in that whole area, only at certain places, that particular species become clumped together. So such a type of distribution, we call it as clumped distribution. Now in animals also we say this clump distribution, that is, you can see these herds of this zebra and the wild beast, now the schools of fishes, then the herd of elephant. All these are some of the examples of clumped distribution in animals, and even in desert also you can see the plant species are clumped together only in the region of this oasis. Now the 4 major factors that affect a population density is schematically shown below. The first factor is natality, that is the birth rate. So if the number of births are more, automatically the population size increases. The second is immigration. Immigration means movement of organism from another area into the area of study. So we call this as immigration. So immigration also adds to the number of population. Then mortality. Mortality is the death rate. That is, if the death rate e-migration means moving out of that area under study to another area. So that we call it as e-migration. So e-migration and mortality, these two factors reduce a population, and immigration and natality, these two factors increase the natality rate, that is the birth rate. So what is natality? Natality is increase in number of individuals in a population under given environmental conditions through reproduction. Now next is natality rate. What is natality rate? It is the increase in number of individuals expressed per unit time. That is, in a particular time period, what is the increase in the number of the individuals, and it can be determined by this simple equation: natality rate B is equal to number of births per unit time divided by the average number of population. Potential natality. It is the maximum number of births produced per individual under ideal condition of environment. Now, when the density of the population is low, the natality rate is low because the chances of mating between the males and females are less. When the density is very high, natality rate is low because there is more competition for food, space, there is poor physiology and poor nutrition and other problems. So natality rate is high only when the species exist under ideal ecological and genetic conditions. The next is ecological natality, also called as realized natality or simple natality. It is the population increase under the actual existing specific conditions. Thus, it takes into account all possible existing environmental conditions. It is also designated as fertility rate. Further, the rate at which the female produce offspring is determined by the following three population characteristics. First one is clutch size, or the number of young produced on each occasion. If the number of young ones produced is more, then automatically the density will become more. The time between one reproduction event and the next. That is, if the time period between one reproduction event and the next is very large, then the density is less. But if the time period between the one reproduction event and the other is very less, then automatically the density and the population size increases. And the age of the first reproduction. Thus, natality usually increases with the period of maturity and then falls again as the organism gets older. Now, the third characteristic feature is the mortality. What is mortality? Mortality is the loss of individuals due to death in a population under given environmental condition. Mortality rate M is the number of death per unit time in a population. Mortality rate M can be determined by the simple equation, that is M is equal to number of deaths per unit time divided by the average population. The next is minimum mortality. It's also called as potential mortality. It represents the theoretical minimum loss under ideal condition. It is a constant in a population. Ecological or realized mortality. This is the actual loss of individuals under a given environmental condition. Ecological mortality is not constant for a population and varies with population and environment conditions such as predation, diseases, and other ecological hazards. Mortality is affected by many factors like density, competition, disease, predation, and environmental conditions. When the rate of natality is equal to the rate of mortality, then we say the population is stationary. Now the next is the population growth. Now here Malthus recognized the fact that there is a connection between resources and population growth. That is, if the resources are plentiful, then there is always a drastic increase in the population growth. And this population growth can occur till the resources are available. When the number of individuals of a population is plotted on the y-axis and the time on the x-axis, a curve is obtained that indicates the trend in the growth of the population size. This curve, we call it as population growth curve. Now, depending upon this growth curves, there are two forms of growth curves. One is the J-shaped curve or the exponential growth curve, and the second is sigmoid curve or logistic growth curve. So here there are two graphs. One graph is explaining the J-shaped curve, the second one is explaining the sigmoid curve. Now first let us take this J-shaped curve. Now see here in this graph, on the x-axis it is the time and on the y-axis it is the population size. So here in the first phase, you won't see much increase in the population size because the individuals need time to get adjusted to the new environment. But once it gets used to the new environment, there is a rapid increase in the population size because there is sufficient resources available and the conditions are favorable for the increase in the size of the population. So we see a rapid increase in the size of the population, and then once the resources get exhausted, then the population size decreases drastically. Thus we get this J-shaped curve. This is very common in these microorganisms, especially the yeast population, etc. Now the sigmoid curve. Now here also on the x-axis it's the time and on the y-axis it is the size of the population. Here also in the initial stage the growth rate of the population is very slow because it has to get used to the new environment, and then once it gets adjusted you'll see that there is the rapid increase in its population, and it starts to multiply rapidly due to presence of resources in the habitat, and the population increases very rapidly, and we call this as the logarithmic phase. And finally when the resources become limited, the population size increase is slowed down. This we call it as negative acceleration until a equilibrium is attained, the level beyond which no major increase in population can occur. Now this is called the carrying capacity. In this last phase, the number of individuals added is almost equal to the number of deaths. Thus, in this type of the growth curve, we get this S-shaped curve, and that is why it is called a sigmoid curve or logistic curve. And this is what occurs in nature. In nature, we have this the logistic curve, because here in this stationary phase only the survival of the fittest take place, and the weaklings are eliminated from the nature, and thus a constant population size is maintained, because beyond that the resources become limited. The next factor is the age distribution. Age distribution is another important characteristic feature of population. Age influences the natality and mortality rate of a population. If the younger age population is more, then automatically the birth rate increases and the population size increases. Now, if the older age is more, then the rate of reproduction will be very less, and hence the population size decreases. So that is how age influences the population. According to Bodenheimer, the individuals of a population can be divided into three groups depending upon their reproductive phase. Pre-reproductive phase means they're all the infant, that is before they attain the reproductive period. The second is the reproductive period, and the third is the post-reproductive period, means here the reproductive capacity of that organism is lost and they cannot produce offsprings. So maximum number of production of offsprings occurs only in the reproductive phase of an organism. Depending upon the proportion of the three age groups in a population, the population can be said whether it is a growing population or whether it may be a stable population or it may be a declining population. It will be a growing population if the reproductive phase population is more. It is stable if the pre-reproductive and reproductive phase are almost same. And it is declining if the pre-reproductive phase and reproductive phase number is less and the post-reproduction group age is more. We call it gives a declining population. A graphical representation of all this can be done. So, a graphical representation of the proportion of individuals of a population in the various age groups at a given time, we call this as the age pyramid. In an age pyramid, the base is occupied by pre-reproductive group, the reproductive group is in the middle, and the post-reproductive group is at the top of the pyramid. Three hypothetical age pyramids can be suggested. One, the pyramid with broad base. Second, bell-shaped pyramid. And third, the urn. Now here you can see this is one of the age structure of human population in three countries which were taken for analysis. And this is the male organism which are in this color, and in this shade of this green we have this female, and in the three countries we have estimated the number of individuals in different age groups. Now here you can see in the first pyramid it is a broad base pyramid, because here the number of individuals in the pre-reproductive phase, their number is more. And then in the reproductive phase, it is comparatively less. And in the post-reproductive phase group, they are the least. So we almost get a conical shape pyramid. So this pyramid, we call it as broad-based pyramid, and this pyramid indicates rapid increase in population. Bell-shaped pyramid. Now here you can see the pre-reproductive phase group and the reproductive phase group, they are almost constant. So here the population attains a stable. That is, it maintains a stable population. So that's why it gives rise to a stable age pyramid. Now in the urn-shaped pyramid, here you'll see that the pre-reproductive phase group, the number is least, the post-reproductive phase is least, and only the reproductive phase is more. So here what happens, this age pyramid shows no growth in the size of the population. So the urn-shaped pyramid is the declining pyramid, bell-shaped pyramid is a stable pyramid, age pyramid, and the broad-based pyramid is the increasing age pyramid. Now we shall study about the life tables and survivorship curves. Life tables can be formulated when sufficient information about a species are available with respect to birth rate, average lifespan, and mortality rate. Life tables provide vital statistics of mortality and life expectancy for the individual of different age groups in a population. In such table, age is represented by the subscript index X and the number of individuals are in the groups of 100, 1000, 10,000 and lakh. The number of living at the beginning of the age group is symbolized as LX and the number of dying age group is symbolized as DX. The mortality rate at each age group QX is calculated by the following formula. Mortality rate QX is equal to dx upon Lx into 100. Survival rate delta X is the difference between the mortality rate and 100%. That is, the survival rate is equal to QX minus 100. There are three general types of survivorship curves which represent a different nature of survivors in different types of population. Now let us see these three types of survivorship curve. The first type is the highly convex curve. In this type of survivorship curve, in the initial stage, the mortality is very less, and towards the end of the lifespan, the mortality rate increases. That is, in other words, the members born at the same time live out the full physiological lifespan characteristic of the species and die about the same time. So that is why we get this convex curve. So you see here in the X is showing the age and the number of individuals on the y-axis. Now you see here, if 10,000 species are born, they all live to their full life expectancy and then at the old age they die. So that is how we get this convex curve. So this type of convex curve is seen in modern man, mountain sheep, etc. Now the second type is the diagonal curve. This type of survivorship curve is characteristic of the species in which the mortality rate is always uniform at all age levels. That is, more or less uniform decrease in number occurs in each age group. And this is commonly seen in members like hydra, gull, and American robin. The third type is the highly concave curve. In this type of survivorship curve, initially, that is in the earlier ages, there is a drastic mortality rate. That is, there is a large number in the decrease of the offsprings in the early age, and then they survive in the later period, and then after attaining their full physiological life, then they die. So that is how we get this concave curve here. This is very common in these oaks, then in sea turtle, oysters, etc. Population dispersal. Movement of individuals into and out of a population is called population dispersal. It plays an important role in geographical distribution of organisms. Population dispersal occurs in nature by three ways. That is, by immigration, immigration, and migration. Immigration, this is the movement of individuals out of a population. It is a permanent and causes spreading of the species to new area. This occurs when there is a overcrowding the population and prevent overexploitation of the habitat. This type of dispersal offers opportunity to the individuals to interbreed with the individuals of the other population and cause genetic heterozygosity and adaptability. In immigration, this is one way of movement of individuals into a population. This leads to genetic heterozygosity in the population, increases the population density, decreases mortality among the immigrants. It also adds to the gene pool. Then migration. This is a two-way mass movement of entire population which involves periodic departure and return of the individuals of a population. It occurs during unfavorable period in the mobile organisms like bird, fishes, etc. Benefits of migration: it enables wide dispersion of population and avoids intra-specific competition for food and shelter. The disadvantage is during the migration there is an increase in mortality rate due to ecological hazards. So migration, it is a two-way, that is when the conditions are unfavorable, the organisms move to the another area where the conditions are favorable. Again, when the conditions become favorable in its hometown, they again go back. This is very common in birds. And the longest migratory bird is the Arctic tern. That is, during the summer in the South Pole, it stays there, and when the winter sets in the South Pole, it moves to the North Pole. So it migrates from one pole to another pole. So this Arctic tern is a very good example for the longest migratory bird. So my dear students, here we complete this topic on the population ecology. Uh, the interactions of population, we shall see it in our next presentation. So once again, thank you all. Take good care of yourself and be safe.